You're standing in your kitchen at 11:47 p.m., stress eating cereal straight from the box, mentally rehearsing tomorrow's apology email to your boss for something that wasn't even your fault. Again, the anger you should have felt 3 hours ago when they dumped that last-minute project on you, nowhere to be found. Instead, there's just this familiar cocktail: guilt, anxiety, that special brand of exhaustion that comes from spending your entire day managing everyone else's emotions while completely ignoring your own. Sound familiar? Welcome to the life of a chronic people pleaser in emotional witness protection. You've become so good at stuffing down your real feelings. You've basically turned your emotional world into an underground bunker. Anger gets shoved into a closet. Disappointment gets locked in the basement. Resentment? That's been banished to the shed out back, where it's been quietly growing into a monster you pretend doesn't exist. But here's the thing about emotions. They're not actually trying to ruin your life. They're more like visitors who've been standing on your doorstep for hours, politely knocking, while you hide behind the curtains pretending nobody's home. And just like real visitors, the longer you ignore them, the louder they knock. What if I told you there was a completely different way to handle this emotional chaos? What if, instead of treating your feelings like unwelcome intruders, you started treating them like visitors who actually have something important to tell you? Buckle up, we're about to blow your mind. You didn't become a people pleaser because you're weak or broken. You became one because you're smart, sensitive, and somewhere along the way you learned that keeping everyone else happy was the most reliable way to feel safe and loved. Maybe you grew up in a house where big emotions meant big problems. Maybe you learned early that your sadness made mom anxious. Your anger made dad withdraw. Your excitement was too much for the room. So you became an emotional contortionist, twisting yourself into whatever shape would keep the peace. You got really, really good at reading the room. You could sense tension from 3 rooms away, swoop in with the perfect joke or helpful gesture to diffuse it. You became the family therapist, the friend who always listens, the coworker who never complains. You turned emotional caretaking into an art form. But here's what nobody tells you about emotional suppression. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more explosive it gets when it finally breaks free. And it always breaks free. Those late-night anxiety spirals, that's your fear trying to get your attention. The Sunday scaries that start on Friday, that's your dread of another week of saying yes when you mean no. The mysterious back pain that flares up right before family dinners, your body is literally trying to tell you something your mind won't let you hear. You've been treating your emotions like they're the problem, when really they're the solution trying to reach you. Here's where everything changes. Instead of seeing emotions as these chaotic forces trying to derail your carefully constructed life, what if you saw them as visitors with specific messages? Anger isn't this scary, destructive monster. It's actually your personal boundary guardian, showing up to tell you, hey, someone just crossed a line here. It's trying to protect your values, your time, your energy. When you ignore anger, you're basically firing your own security system. Sadness isn't weakness or self-pity. It's your internal processing system, helping you grieve what you've lost and make space for what comes next. When you stuff down sadness, you're blocking your own healing mechanism. Anxiety isn't just random chaos, it's your future-focused friend, trying to help you prepare for what's coming. Sure, it can get a little overzealous sometimes. Okay, a lot overzealous. But its heart is in the right place. Even guilt, that emotion you probably know better than your own phone number, isn't inherently bad. Healthy guilt shows up when you've actually done something that goes against your values. It's trying to course correct you back to who you want to be. The problem isn't having these emotional visitors. The problem is that you've been slamming the door in their faces for so long that they've started breaking windows to get your attention. So what does it actually look like to treat emotions like visitors? It starts with the radical idea that feelings aren't problems to be solved. They're information to be received. When anger knocks on your door, instead of immediately shoving it away, you pause. You ask, what are you here to tell me? Maybe it says, that comment your friend made yesterday, it wasn't okay. You deserve an apology. Or maybe it reveals, you've been overcommitting again. Your energy is being hijacked by people who don't appreciate it. When sadness arrives, you don't have to throw it a party, but you also don't have to call the police. You can sit with it for a moment and listen. What are you mourning, you might ask? Sometimes sadness is grieving the childhood you didn't get to have, or the version of yourself you had to abandon to keep everyone else comfortable. This doesn't mean you have to act on every emotion or let them run your life. You're not suddenly going to start screaming at your boss or sobbing in the grocery store. You're just going to start acknowledging that these feelings exist and that they might have something useful to say. Think of it like this. When a friend stops by unexpectedly, you don't have to invite them to move in, but you also don't have to pretend they don't exist. You can acknowledge them, listen to what they need, then decide how to respond. Here's something that might blow your mind. You don't have to have your emotional shit together all the time. I know. This goes against everything you've been taught about being a good person. But perfectionism is just people-pleasing wearing a productivity mask. You've been trying to be emotionally perfect for so long. You've forgotten what it feels like to be human. Real humans feel multiple contradictory emotions at the same time. Real humans get irrationally angry about small things, and surprisingly calm about big things. Real humans have emotional hangovers, days when they cry for no apparent reason. This is not a bug in the human system. It's a feature. When you give yourself permission to be imperfectly human, something magical happens. You stop using all your energy to maintain the facade of having it all together, and you can actually start addressing what's really going on underneath. You know that friend who always seems so put together that you feel weird sharing your problems with them? Don't be that friend to yourself. Be the friend who says, yeah, this is messy and hard, and we're going to figure it out together. This is where it gets tricky for people pleasers. You're so used to fixing everyone else's emotional problems that when you finally start feeling your own feelings, the urge to immediately solve them is overwhelming. But here's the thing, not every emotion needs to be fixed. Some emotions just need to be felt. When loneliness shows up, your people-pleasing brain immediately starts making plans. Text more friends, join more activities, say yes to more invitations. But sometimes loneliness isn't asking you to do anything. Sometimes it's just asking you to acknowledge that connection matters to you, or that you've been so busy taking care of everyone else. You've forgotten to nurture the relationship with yourself. When disappointment arrives after your friend cancels plans again, you don't have to immediately jump to, it's fine, I understand, we'll reschedule. You can let disappointment sit there for a minute. Say, yeah, this sucks. I was looking forward to this. Now I'm disappointed. That's a normal human response. This doesn't make you selfish or dramatic. It makes you honest. The goal isn't to become an emotional wreck who falls apart at every feeling. The goal is to become someone who can feel their feelings without being afraid of them, who can respond to emotions from a place of wisdom rather than reactive fear. Just because you're welcoming emotions as visitors doesn't mean you have to let them trash your house. Some emotional visitors are helpful and wise. Others are drunk on old stories and need to be managed with care. That voice in your head that sounds suspiciously like your most critical family member, that's not your intuition. That's your internalized critic, and it doesn't get to make decisions for you. You can acknowledge it. I hear you. I know you think you're protecting me from rejection, without letting it run your life. The anxiety that wants to rehearse every possible catastrophic scenario for next week's presentation, you can listen to its concerns. You're worried about being prepared and making a good impression, without letting it keep you up all night running disaster simulations. Learning to set boundaries with emotions is like learning to be a good host. You welcome your guests, you listen to what they have to say, you offer them appropriate hospitality, then you decide how long they get to stay, and how much influence they get to have over your decisions. Here's where the rubber meets the road. How do you start being emotionally authentic when your entire identity has been built around emotional accommodation? You start small, really small. Instead of automatically saying, I'm fine when someone asks how you are, you might say, I'm pretty tired today, or I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Instead of immediately agreeing when someone suggests plans, you might say, let me think about that and get back to you. These feel like tiny shifts, but for someone who's been emotionally invisible for years, they're revolutionary acts of self-respect. You'll probably feel guilty at first. Your people-pleasing brain will sound the alarm. Warning! You're being selfish. You're going to hurt people's feelings. They're going to leave you. This is normal. Guilt is just the price of admission to a more authentic life. But here's what actually happens when you start being emotionally honest. People respect you more, not less. The relationships that can't handle your authenticity weren't really relationships. They were performance contracts. And the relationships that can handle it become deeper, richer, and more satisfying than anything you experienced while wearing your people-pleasing mask. The story you've been telling yourself is that emotions are dangerous, that your feelings are too much, that the only way to be loved is to be easy and accommodating. But what if that story isn't true? What if your sensitivity isn't a flaw to be managed, but a gift to be honored? What if your ability to feel deeply is actually your superpower, not your weakness? The same emotional sensitivity that made you a people pleaser also makes you incredibly intuitive, empathetic, capable of deep connection. You don't need to get rid of these qualities. You just need to learn how to use them in service of your own growth, instead of everyone else's comfort. You can be someone who cares deeply about others and who honors their own emotional experience. You can be someone who's sensitive to other people's feelings and who doesn't abandon their own needs in the process. You can be someone who wants to help others and who knows that the best way to do that is from a place of emotional wholeness, not emotional depletion. Imagine waking up in a world where you trust your own emotional experience, where anger shows up and you think, interesting, what's this about? Instead of immediately trying to talk yourself out of it, where sadness arrives and you make space for it. Instead of frantically trying to cheer yourself up, imagine having conversations where you say what you actually think, instead of what you think the other person wants to hear. Imagine making decisions based on what feels right to you, instead of what will make everyone else comfortable. This isn't some fantasy land where you become emotionally perfect and never struggle. This is a real, achievable way of living where you become emotionally honest and resilient. You become someone who can feel their feelings without being overwhelmed by them. someone who can set boundaries without feeling guilty about them, someone who can say no to things that don't serve them, and yes to things that do. You become someone who treats their own emotional experience with the same care and attention you've always given to everyone else's. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop trying so hard to manage everyone else's emotions and start taking care of your own, you actually become more helpful, not less. You show up as your full, authentic self, instead of as a depleted version of who you think you should be. Your emotions have been trying to reach you for years. They've been knocking on your door, leaving voicemails, sending texts you've been ignoring. They're not going away because they can't. They're part of you. The invitation isn't to become someone who's ruled by their emotions, or who uses feelings as an excuse to treat people badly. The invitation is to become someone who's emotionally literate, who can read the wisdom in their own experience, and respond from a place of strength rather than reactivity. Your emotions aren't trying to make your life harder. They're trying to make your life truer. So the next time anger, sadness, fear, or even joy shows up at your door, try something different. Instead of pretending nobody's home, open the door, ask what they need, listen to what they have to say. You might be surprised by how much wisdom has been waiting on your doorstep all along. The people-pleasing version of you served a purpose. It kept you safe when you needed safety, but you don't need that protection anymore. You're strong enough now to feel your feelings, and wise enough to know what to do with them. Your emotions aren't visitors you need to fear. They're visitors you've been waiting your whole life to welcome home.